Welcome to the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for Indiana Basketball Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, who I'm sure when I ask him how he's doing, will be in a good mood today. Help me welcome to the show, Kent Sterling. How you doing, Kent?
I'm in a great mood, but I'm a little bit woozy because of the altitude. We are just a game out of first half, Indiana is, and that is rarefied air for Hoosier fans, I think.
Oh, no, I remember being just a game out of first before. It was an entirely different century, but I do remember it.
Yeah, last night was terrific, wasn't it? I mean, great start, and then kind of some swales in the middle, but in the end, Franklin hits the three, and Brunk hits the shot on that nice cut, and off you go.
Well, my only worry from this was it seemed to me like Indiana should have won the game by 8 to 10 points, and they would have. But the free throw shooting, I think it was 11 for 20. I mean, if they're 15 for 20, this is a lot more comfortable win.
And one of those was the front end of a 1-on-1 by Justin Smith. And so that's a free throw attempt that was forfeited. So they did leave a lot of points on the board. Michigan State got hot in the second half, as you assumed. They're not going to be cold for the entire 40 minutes. They wind up 9 of 21 shooting threes, but still Indiana winds up getting the W. Tom Izzo, a little bit pissed off during the postgame press conference, whining a little bit about Franklin hitting the three, and that's what we like. We like the whiny Tom Izzo.
I didn't think we liked him, but we like to make him whine.
Yes. Well, when he's whining, you know you did something good.
Yeah.
He's not going to say that they did anything good. He's always going to alibi it, and he's always going to cry foul. But when he does that, we know he's upset, and that makes us happy.
Yeah, and it's one thing to dominate Nebraska in the paint or Northwestern in the paint, but last night they dominated Michigan State in the paint, and Indiana's performance was a full team effort. Joey Brunk, 14.6 rebounds. Trace Jackson-Davis, 12 points, 4 rebounds. Justin Smith, 6 points, 4 rebounds. Race Thompson, 4 points, 4 rebounds. I mean,
I thought he was really good.
Yeah, I mean, all four of these guys played really well underneath.
You feel like you found a $20 bill on the curb anytime Race Thompson scores, and he really I thought turned a corner last night and started playing like what we expected him to play like, and that's a good sign. I thought Joey was terrific. Justin Smith, I think he's got to get more active offensively. I thought it was not a great offensive night for him, obviously, with 6 points, 4 of them coming from the line. But the 3 offensive rebounds were absolutely huge. They only had 8 turnovers, which stunned me because it felt like about 14. I don't know how it wound up being only 8, but they were all seared into my memory because, they reflected an indifference to possession of the basketball, which drives me crazy and drives all Indiana fans crazy.
Yeah, and I think three-point shooting-wise, of course, it wasn't there because it's Indiana. But what did happen was it seems like every three they made was critical, and the two that really stood out to me, into the first half, Al Durham hits the three at the buzzer, and then the other one that stood out to me was by Armaan Franklin when IU had just went down by 3. I think there was a couple-minute lull. Nobody did anything. And Franklin hit a three that tied it back up, and I think those two were really huge shots.
I love Armaan Franklin. That's a kid who comes off the bench with energy every single time. Granted, he doesn't always do exactly the right thing with the basketball, or defensively, he can get lost just a little bit. But every game he takes a couple of steps forward toward being a trustable asset on the floor. And last night, in his 15 minutes, I thought his contributions were critical on both ends. I thought he was absolutely terrific. And between he and Trace, and then even Joey Brunk, who's in his 4th year as a college basketball player, despite just being a junior, that these guys are showing evolution in the positive that really makes me think that this team could get a little bit good.
Yeah, and the other thing that makes me think that is just 8 turnovers is all they had, which made it almost – because we know the Spartans thrive in transition offense.
Yeah.
But when you can take care of the ball like that, Michigan State didn't get many easy buckets. I think that was huge here too. 8 turnovers, and I hate to bring this up because we said we're not going to talk about him anymore, but 3 of those were Devontae Green in the first half. So you take those away, 5 turnovers in 40 minutes.
Yeah, just 13 minutes for Devontae Green, 1 of 5 from the floor, 0 of 3 from beyond the arc. And you really, like, I've gone from feeling kind of sorry for the kid and hoping that he can respond to the adversity by grinding through it and finding his way out the other side to being, like, really palpably worried about the kid, because I think last night he just cratered. And I wonder if, like, sometimes guys don't come out of that. I mean, you've seen it in sports as a coach, and we've all seen it as fans and media following guys closely. Sometimes they just get crushed by the moment in a way from which they never recover.
You think maybe Archie is using him, like brings him in? If he hits his first couple shots, he leaves him in. If he misses, he takes him out.
I think so, and I think that that's gotten to him. You know, I think that when Archie was saying, okay, we're going to ride with this kid because he can shoot it and he can space the defense, he can create some openings for us on the offensive end. And so we're going to give the ball away every once in a while, but I think we can win with it. And now he's gotten to the point where he's like, you know what, screw that. We're not going to lose because of this kid, because what they were getting was maybe 1 in 4 games where he had one of those games like he had against Florida State. And you thought, okay, with this kid, we can really beat good teams. And then you get penalized for it down the road. And I think Archie decided, you know what, the hell with it. Let's kind of dance with the girls that we can trust and move forward that way and hope they hit some shots. And it's kind of worked out for the best, hasn't it?
So you're saying Devontae is not a Vinny the Microwave Johnson from the Detroit Pistons?
I'm afraid not.
Because you remember Chuck Daly'd bring him in, and if he'd hit his first 2 shots, he'd leave him in the rest of the game, and Vinny'd score like 30 points. But if he missed his first 2, you had to get him out because he wasn't going to make any.
Vinny could get 9 in 3 possessions and completely change the game. And I don't think Devontae, at least not where he is right now, I don't think that he's that guy. I mean, he's trying. You can see that he's trying. And it's like Indiana fans, to some extent, are driving me a little bit nuts talking about the guy because they're saying, oh, he tries to play hero ball and he's trying to get on ESPN Sports Center.
I think he's just trying to win the game and it ain't working out and he's pressing.
And that's just the way he is. He knows basketball in that way. It's like, okay, I'm going to try to win the game. And at Indiana and in almost every place where college basketball is played, unless you got a guy like Allen Iverson who can just take over a game, you know, you've got to play as 1 of 5. And he just hasn't been he hasn't been groomed to do that kind of thing. And so he's a guy who's comfortable with the ball in his hands. But you saw it last night. I mean, they had Finney and they're working and it's beautiful and they got a 15-point lead. And then Green comes in and the ball just stops at the top of the key extended, and he's kind of got it on his hip, like, what the hell do I do now? And you can't have that kind of – I mean, it's so appallingly obvious to everybody the difference between Rob and Devontae at the point. We just have no backup point guard right now. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another guy that I don't think he gets enough credit. It's Joey Brunk. I mean, he gives you a veteran presence on the field or on the court. He constantly provides energy for this team too, which has been sorely lacking the last 2 years.
And he was not that guy at Butler. You know, he's showing a different side of his personality at Indiana that's really, really fun to watch. And it's fun to watch him. And you did see him kind of start to rely on that back to the basket stuff where instead of being 6'10" like he is, he starts to play like he's about 6'6". You know, and he just gets small down on the block with his back to the bucket and doesn't get the ball up over the top of a really good defensive player. And that's the way it's going to be in the Big Ten because there's no conference with better coaching from top to bottom. So they're going to learn what you like to do and what you don't like to do, and they're going to take away what you like to do. But I thought Brunk was really, really good last night. He was very active, especially early in the game. And that bucket with just under a minute left was humongous for Indiana. Look at that game, man. If Michigan State winds up winning that game, Indiana's 4-4. They are way down in the standings in the Big Ten, but because they won, they're a game out of first place. And that's one bucket. One bucket can do that, and Brunk got it for us last night.
Yeah, and I mean, this team to me, it stands out because when Archie Miller got here a couple of years ago, He was supposed to be a defensive coach, and everybody whined about the defense the last 2 years. But now, the way this team hits the boards, the way they play defense, I think I think you could consider them a contender in the Big Ten because really nobody has broken away from the pack. Everybody's kind of sitting there, and we're going to talk about the Maryland game in a little bit. And I think the Maryland game is a game that will tell us whether this team could possibly really contend for a Big Ten title.
I totally agree. And you know what else happens this weekend is Illinois goes on the road to play Michigan, and Michigan State goes on the road to play Minnesota up at the Barn. Which means if Indiana can beat Maryland at Simon Scott Assembly Hall, I know it's ridiculous. Who would have thought this? Like 1 through 12, these teams are all really, really good, and then Indiana's got to go on the road. So maybe we ought to, if Indiana's fortunate enough to win Sunday, we should inhale as much of that as we possibly can, because we may not get back there for a while. But, it sure as hell is a lot of fun talking about Indiana toward the top of the Big Ten instead of Indiana languishing 10th or 11th in the Big Ten.
Well, and if you look at it, is there any team here that really scares you in the Big Ten for Indiana to play outside of Indiana themselves? Because I think Indiana has proven to be their own worst enemy when they have lost.
They just got to make free throws, right? They got to go on the road and understand the challenges of what's going on as teams play them a second time. In a lot of cases, they're going to be much more familiar with them. They're going to know what Indiana wants to do. There's going to be no kind of schematic trickery that's going to give Indiana an advantage at all. They're going to have the benefit of having played everybody also. But, one of the things that I enjoyed watching last night, even though I love Chris Holtmann, and his staff over at Ohio State, Minnesota won on the road against Ohio State, and Minnesota has been terrible on the road.
Yeah.
So you look at that game, and what is that? That's on the 1st of February. Indiana plays at Ohio State. They could steal a win there. So you start to kind of look at this, and you say, okay, you know what? Purdue looks terrible. You should at least split against them. You've got Iowa once. You've got Penn State, which has kind of come back to the pack. You've got Michigan. They're having a tough time. Can you go up to Ann Arbor and win? You start to do this factoring that's completely foreign to us, at least back to 2016, where we were really kind of engaged in, all right, can we go 12-8? Can we go 13-7? I think they can do that.
Well, I think when you look at it, you've got Maryland coming here. Maryland's a team that has not played as well on the road this year. I mean, you could look at it when they went to Iowa. Now, I think Iowa might be the most complete team in the Big Ten, and Iowa beat them pretty good. I think it was by 18 or 20 points.
Yeah,
but
18.
They went to Wisconsin and lost. They squeaked by Purdue in a game where they had a huge lead early. They beat Northwestern, but pretty much everybody does that. So, you look at them, they lost to Seton Hall at Seton Hall, and Seton Hall was missing one of their best players. They got beat at Penn State. So I don't see why you can't get those two. But the thing that's really intriguing to me now is Penn State's not a great team, but they're really good at home. You got Ohio State after that. These both look like winnable games to me.
They could be. But we've got to remember, too, that this is a really young IU team. They're going to lose Green and they're going to lose Davis, which isn't going to really cause any kind of erosion of quality. Everybody else is going to get a year older. Next year is the year, right? This year, they're going to kind of set the table for next year. This year, it's still a flawed team. This year, they don't make foul shots. They don't hit a lot of threes. They do rebound well. They scored in the paint last night. They were plus 16 in the paint last night against Michigan State. So there are ways that this team can improve, but they might be improving right before our very eyes, and we might not have to wait to next year to see the kind of the fruition of all of that. Maryland is one of the younger teams in the Big Ten in terms of experience on the floor. You look at KenPom, and it's Maryland and Northwestern as the only teams with less experience on the floor than Indiana. Going on the road when you're young is a little bit more difficult. Going on the road to play at Indiana when Indiana fans kind of smell some blood in the water, that's a wholly different thing. And you heard it last night, man. I'm usually not a big guy who's like, man, the crowd can make a difference. But last night, I thought that crowd made a difference with its lift, especially early. They were great.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we talk about IU doesn't really stand out. They got issues. But I think what we've seen is there's not a team in all of college basketball that doesn't have issues right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're all flawed in one way or another. And with Maryland, you've got a really, really good player in Anthony Cowan Jr., who's averaging 15-4, and then also he's kind of an assist machine. He's a senior. He's that guy for them. If you control him, you feel pretty good, but they are flawed, and they are young. And there's Mark Turgeon on the bench. I don't know what you think about Turgeon. I think he's an okay coach. But anytime you look down, it's kind of like Dale Brown with Knight, right? Knight says, I thought we were in trouble, and then I looked at the other bench. I thought I saw Dale Brown. I kind of feel that way about Mark Turgeon.
Well, how about this? I've got to personally watch Chris Mullen and Patrick Ewing coach over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Mark Turgeon's better than those guys.
That doesn't work. Doesn't anybody know that doesn't work? If you hire an alum who had a great NBA career, tell me when that's ever worked. Clyde Drexler did that at Houston. It was a train wreck. Sidney Lowe did that at NC State, and it was awful. You're just not going to get the results that you hope for. You win the press conference, but you lose a lot of basketball games.
How about this? How many great college basketball players turn out to be great coaches?
Yeah, not so many. We'll see with Juwan Howard. Juwan Howard could get it done, but I totally agree. I always think, and this is true in baseball, you look at guys, the catchers or the backup catchers, they tend to make really good managers, not the guys who hit 310 and, belted a lot of dingers. It's usually the guys that kind of had, like Tony La Russa, had a cup of coffee in the majors, played a little bit, I think, for the Angels and the Cubs, and then winds up being a terrific manager. Joe Torre might be as notable an exception to that as there is.
Yeah, but he wasn't a great catcher. He was a good catcher.
But he won a batting title back in 1972. I think he hit 366.
Yeah, but I still wouldn't call him a great guy. I mean, he's not like Johnny Bench.
No, he's not a Hall of Famer.
But he was
good. Pretty good.
Yeah. All right, so there's one guy. Everybody else?
Frank Robinson was a pretty good manager, not a great manager. Dusty Baker was a pretty good player. I hated him as a manager.
Me too.
But in 2003, he was pretty good with the Cubs.
Yeah, until
he wore everybody out. And,
he was good with the
Bartman,
Reds, too, until we all realized that we could only go so far with Dusty.
Hey, Steve Bartman. Good Lord.
That had nothing to do with Steve Bartman.
It had everything to do with Bartman. If Bartman clears the deck, if he does what any idiot in the front row knows to do, and that's clear out and let your man make the play, if he just does the smart thing that you have to do when you sit in the front row, Cubs go to the World Series. Might have won it back.
Doesn't. We don't even know if he makes the catch. That's a tough catch to make up against.
Oh no,
the wall.
You can see that. They've done scientific looks at the trajectory. It was going right into Moises' mitt. And then you're 4 outs to go. They get that ground ball to Gonzalez, and you're out of the inning. And good night, good luck to the Marlins, and the Cubs go to the World Series. It wouldn't even have needed to fall apart.
Well, how about this, though? If your shortstop would have caught a ground ball, you'd have been fine, too.
Yeah, and Alex, but you know how it is. It's kind of like free throws for Indiana. They see a bunch of free throws not go in. You start to feel like, well, they're never going to go in. And that's the vibe. Man, I'll tell you, the next night I went to that Game 7 in 2003, and the vibe in Wrigley Field was so relentlessly, terrified about what was going to happen. It was just awful. You knew that was not going to end well, and it sure didn't.
I know how that feeling is. I'm a Bengals fan.
You live with that feeling 17
weeks a year. 2013, they're playing the Chargers in the playoffs, and everybody's all excited. First play of the game, the Chargers ran for 7 yards, and you could just see everybody sit down and say, oh, shit.
It's exactly
true.
The way it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think the Marlins were going to win it all that year no matter what, because sometimes there's just teams that are going to do that.
And the Cubs were that team that year. And actually, Bartman screwed it all up.
If they were, they'd have won.
The idiot in the turtleneck screwed it all up.
Okay.
I know I'm in the minority thinking that. Dan Dockich always yells at me. He's like, he had nothing to do with it. It's not crazy.
It has nothing to do with the shortstop booting the next play.
Oh, wait a minute. Does one free throw being missed cause a problem with the following free throw?
No. But if a bunch of free throws are missed, I think you get 3 or 4 1-and-1s and you're missing them, it puts more pressure. Yeah, but I don't think in a baseball game with a easily hit ground ball to the shortstop that a fan getting in the way of a ball one time is going to affect the shortstop making the play, Ken.
But here's what he was doing. He's trying to turn 2. He's trying to hustle to the relay at second, and that would have been unnecessary if Bartman gets out of the way. Moises catches the ball.
If
that's
Moises
the
catches the ball, because I guarantee you this, if you look at the trajectory of that ground ball to shortstop, 99.99% of the time he makes the play. It's just the one time he doesn't.
And if all he had to do is get the one out, I think he makes the play. And because Bartman screwed everything up, he had to try to turn 2. He hustled through it, and it all blew up.
I'm telling you this. I've been going to baseball games for 50 years. If a ball gets near me, I'm going to catch that damn thing.
Not in the front row.
Yeah, I will.
Not when your guys are in the field.
I'll catch it. I'll just catch it. That's my ball.
You know what? Here, I'll tell you.
They can buy their own ball.
There was a thing that was completely – it was very, very similar at Fenway Park, I think during that same postseason, where Trot Nixon came over toward Pesky's porch to catch a ball that was just out of play, just off the field. And there was a fan in the front row that backed everybody off and gave Trot Nixon space so he could make that play.
Okay. It's still not Bartman's fault that you guys completely choked in Game 7 either.
Well, that was going to I'm telling you, I've never felt an atmosphere that was so horrifyingly negative in my life as I did that day at Wrigley walking in. Even when they had a lead, I think Lou hit a home run, Kerry Wood hit a home run, and still you're like, this is going to spin all kinds of ways bad, because that was like the atmosphere. And then conversely, I went to Game 7 of the 2011 World Series in St. Louis against the Rangers, and the mood there was so positive that literally you felt like there was no way the Cardinals were going to lose that game. It's fascinating how that happens, and you can feel it. It's a tangible thing that you can feel, and 9 times out of 10 it kind of pays off. And you're absolutely right in the way you feel, the way you kind of gauge the mood of a place.
Yeah. Well, if Alex Gonzalez doesn't boot that ball, they Plus, I can also tell you this, from what do I remember, I think Dusty Baker, after that, issued like 2 intentional walks, which both came around to score also.
Yeah, it was the worst half inning since 1929 when the Cubs gave up a 10 spot to the Philadelphia Athletics.
Yeah. I can tell you this. I enjoyed it as a Reds fan because you Cub fans were real annoying.
That's just terrible. Listen, taking joy at the misery of others, I don't think is the hallmark of a quality human being. But
I'm not a quality human being because I cheer for the Bengals and the Reds and the Pacers and IU. So it's just it's just disappointment all the time. So I want other people to feel my disappointment also.
You felt pretty good in the 70s, though.
Oh, yeah. I felt really good, actually, until I got to be like 20 years old. Everything was good for me until like 1990. The first baseball season I remember is 1975. The first game I went to, I walk out into the beautiful Riverfront Stadium, and I see Johnny Bench down here, Tony Perez, Joe Morgan, Pete Rose. I mean, that was a pretty good team. It's been downhill since. IU. 75, 76, 81, 87, all great teams. My Bengals, in the 80s, actually beat the Steelers more than we lost to them, went to the Super Bowl twice. Reds win it all in 1990. Nothing has happened since.
No, it's been a long cup of coffee for you since any glory in your life, which I'm starting to feel good about because you taking your enjoyment at the Cubs getting beaten 0-3. I'm starting to take it personal.
And I would like to tell you this: I cheered for the Indians in the World Series too.
Cleveland?
Yeah.
Jeez, that betrays what should be every part of your heritage.
No, it doesn't, because The Indians were indigenous people. You just had a little cub on your uniform.
They were indigenous. Yeah, Chief Wahoo. He was the most indigenous Indian ever, wasn't he?
I just remember the first time I ever saw a Cleveland Indian game at Memorial Stadium. I didn't go, but I remember like the Major League Baseball game of the week in like 1980, and they did a preview because they had this rookie called Super Joe Charbonneau. You remember Joe Charbonneau?
Yeah.
And I remember
he can open
watching
beer bottles with his eye sockets.
Yeah, well, he could do that better than he could hit. But he was really good for like, I think for like 3 months he was like a stud, and then he went back to normal. But I remember it was like clockwork. The Cubs and Indians would be in contention till the like middle of May, and then it would just drop off.
Yeah, the Cubs in '77, they were 47-22 at one point. Lou Boudreau used to be, speaking of Indians, used to be the Cubs radio analyst, and he said, "Okay, 25 over 500. You can't go under 500 after you've been 20 games or 25 games over." And they finished exactly 500 that season. They had a train wreck in the second half.
He was right then.
He was, and that was sweet Lou Boudreau and a gentler soul. I don't know. He was a good guy.
Yeah, and you had to be really good to win back then because you had the Phillies and the Pirates were both really good back then.
Yeah, they had Cubs in '77 were a lot of fun until they weren't. And then it got awful, and our dreams were dashed yet again.
I see. I wouldn't have been as happy then because I didn't know how annoying you people were back then. Because we were probably the ones that were annoying back then.
I was way annoying. I think in '07. I think it was 07. It was either '07 or '08, but I think it was '07. The Cubs clinched a playoff spot at Great American Ballpark, and so we went down for the series. And when the Cubs clinched, I don't know, I went completely off the rails and danced in the outfield, or danced in the bleachers, and went to the Hofbrau house across the river and just lost my mind. It was beautiful.
All right. In 1977, wasn't that when you guys traded for Bill Bonham to the Reds for Woody Fryman, too?
Yeah, right.
That was a great trade for both teams.
Bill Bonham lost 22 games for the Cubs, I think, in '75.
That's pretty good. I mean, you know what, though? You got to be a really good pitcher to get this pitch in that many Major League Baseball games. You do.
And he seemed to be – with – you look at Mike Krukow and Steve Stone and Bill Bonham, Ray Burris, that was not a that was like the most mediocre starting rotation maybe in the history of baseball, top to bottom.
Well, in '77, we got a baseball writer on the Grilling Truth that wrote about a trade. Wasn't that the same year that you guys traded Bill Madlock for like Bobby Mercer and Steve Ontiveros?
That was after the '76 season, and it looked like it was genius. Yeah, well, here's what happened is Phil Wrigley owned the Cubs then, and Andre Thornton, who is a ball player for the Cubs, said, well, now we're going to get paid. And as soon as he and Madlock started chirping about getting paid, Wrigley forced the Cubs management to deal both those guys. Ontiveros hit .299 and .277. He was really good for that year. And Mercer was okay, too. That looked like a pretty damn good trade for a while, but man, Madlock was just when he got to the Pirates, he was awful good, wasn't he?
Yeah, and Ontiveros was a guy who I think only had 1 year where he batted .299 and everything.
Yeah,
else.
That was it.
He was a good glove. For him. He was a solid defensive third baseman, but that was about it.
That was that trade was disappointing. They traded Fergie Jenkins for Madlock, and you felt like he kind of got fleeced. But then Madlock won a couple of batting titles for the Cubs, and everything was okay.
Yeah, Madlock was a great player. I'm actually hoping to have him on a Legends show in the next few months.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, actually, that article that we wrote about that trade, he actually retweeted it, and I just sent him a message. I know he has some family issues right now, so he said he has to wait probably till more towards summer. But that's a guy I want to talk to because that was the We Are Family Pirates in 1979.
Yeah, and he was, you don't think about him as a part of that group, but he was a really important part of that group. You think about Pops and you think about Parker, but Madlock, a significant piece of that puzzle for sure.
I think about Rennie Stennett.
He went 7 for 7 against the Cubs once. 7 for 7.
That is why I think of Rennie Stennett, because I had his baseball card when I was a kid, and was it a doubleheader or extra inning game?
I think it was extra innings.
Okay, because I remember there was a Rennie Stennett baseball card in the 70s about him going 7 for 7 against the Cubs.
I think that was the first time anybody had ever gone 7 for 7. I remember Don Kessinger going 6 for 6 for the Cubs once and getting all excited about that. But Stennett was just, and that was one of those typical days at Wrigley where the wind's blowing out. And, it was like playing slow pitch softball.
All right. You think anybody's listening to us anymore?
I don't know. This has devolved from Indiana basketball straight into like baseball of the 70s. But you know what? What the hell?
I love baseball in the 70s, though.
I do, too.
I'm not
I
a
talk
big
about
fan
that all
day, but maybe we'll just start doing a baseball to 70s show. We'll just call each other whenever one of us has a thought.
For a bunch of old guys who play Stratomatic baseball, those
I used to play, what was it, APBA baseball.
Oh, yeah, APA? Absolutely.
Yeah. I didn't play Stratomatic, but I played the APBA or whatever it was.
I played both and enjoyed them both. And, yeah, that's there are people who take that stuff very, very seriously, but it's always fun.
All right, Kent. So Steve Bartman has a new book out called Oops, and I found out he copyrighted it before you did yours, so you may have to change the name of it. But you want to tell everybody where they can find your book?
Well, they can find it on Amazon. If you just search Kent Sterling, Oops, the yellow and red cover pops up, The Art of Learning from Mistakes and Adventures, 37 chapters of my misfortune and what I learned from them. It's great bathroom reading. So I would say it's like 37 poops. That's what you get out of Oops. And well worth the cash. The audio book, the ebook, the hardcover book, they all make wonderful gifts.
All right, guys, so make sure you check out Kent Sterling's book, Oops. You can also follow Kent on Twitter, @Kent Sterling, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we do Breakfast with Kent every morning on both Facebook and Twitter. 2 different shows. The show's so nice we do it twice. Every weekday morning at 8. And then you can watch it throughout the day if you like. You don't have to watch it live.
All right, Kent, you want to do an Indiana beat Maryland show? We're about to win the Big Ten and maybe go to the Final Four on Monday show?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, Monday. Well, hold on. I don't know about Monday because I got to take my son to the doctor. I forgot about that. You want to do it Sunday after the game?
Sure.
All right,
Sounds
we'll go
fun.
Sunday after. What time is the game Sunday?
The game, I think, is at 2 o'clock.
All right, so we'll be on somewhere around 4:15, 4:30, and then we'll talk about how we're about to win the Big Ten and go to the Final Four. So make sure you check us out then.
Actually, at 1 o'clock. Sorry,
1 o'clock?
It's at 1 o'clock. Yep.
All right, so 3:15, 3:30, unless it goes to overtime or something. We will be on right after Indiana beats Maryland on Sunday. But until then, he's Ken Sterling. I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.